Hi, this is Max, your producer and your lead 3D modeler. I'm going to be running you through how to do some basic texturing. So this is a grandfather clock that I whipped up real fast for the purposes of this tutorial, though it will be used in the game. So this is Blender 2.8, which is the current version of Blender. Some of the key shortcuts that I will be using throughout the video may not work, as I have reset my shortcuts to work in the older versions of Blender. But ignoring that, let's continue. So this is the base layout mode. You might also start in the modeling mode that is similar to this. But you are primarily going to be using the UV editing mode. So now that we're in UV editing mode, you can see that you have two windows. On this side, you will have the 3D model itself. And if you need to get into the edit modes where you can grab the individual faces, you're going to want to hit Tab. Otherwise, you can also go up here to the top and reselect your modes manually. On this side, this is where you will actually be seeing your UV map. I'm going to go hit A to select everything. You can see that the UV map appears on this side. The UV map is a 2D flattened version of the 3D model that is dictated by these red lines called seams that I have manually stuck down for you and unwrapped the models for your ease of texturing. Now the reason that you're going to want your model open is so that you can see which faces correspond to which on the model. I'm going to use Control L while having face mode selected, and that will select everything within a set of seams. So you can see that I have selected these faces and it has popped up on this side of the UV map. If you want to figure out which UVs in particular correspond to which faces, you can also do a brush select, which I do C, and that'll pop up correspondingly. You can also do the inverse, which is grab a piece over here, use H key to hide, and it'll hide it on the 3D mode. So you can see that I hid this part, and over here this became unselected because they're linked together. If you feel the need to move the UV maps and re-export them for ease of texture, you are more than welcome to do so. The UV map is actually only there as a guide, or at least the image that I have uploaded is there as a guide for you to do your texturing. And you would go ahead and do that by hitting UV at the top and export UV layout. We're trying to keep all of our basic textures to 1024 by 1024. Okay, so now that you have this, I'm going to go ahead and open Clip Studio Paint, which is the equivalent of Photoshop for me. And you can see here, this is what you're going to load up with when you first get your UV map. I've turned it to an overlay mode and put it at the top of my layers, and I will sometimes fluctuate the opacity up or down for visual sake. I'm going to, even though I've already modeled this, or textured this, I'm going to do a quick run through. So typically what I'll do is I will go through and do a base color layer. So for instance, I know that this piece and this piece are both gold because they're part of the rotating piece in the interior of the clock. So I'm going to go ahead and run through those with the gold, and then everything else is wood, with the exception of some faces and detailed bits, but I will do those on a separate layer. So I would go through and I would do this, and eventually, I've already done this for myself, I end up with something like this. You can kind of see that I have some bits here. This face is darkened because this is an interior face. If we go back to Blender, you can see that that is the inside of this little crevice. You don't necessarily have to darken it because lights and shadows should help do that for you, but I feel it usually helps show off the inside of the model better, or the hanging parts in the model. These are also just some little detailed pieces that I did in different colors. The next thing I did was I went and found a royalty-free wood texture, and what I've been doing throughout the course of texturing this has been kind of grabbing swaths of this at random, dropping it on the inside, and scaling it down. You do have to be mindful of the direction of the UV maps because they're not all going straight up and down. Like here you can see this is an angle. So if you were going to do this one, you would want to make sure that you scaled it down and kind of rotated it so that it fit. Then you will just kind of layer this almost in many different little pieces and bits. And luckily wood is pretty forgiving for the most part, and I've tried my best to make the UV map so that it is all of the seams are kind of hidden away in places they shouldn't be seen. But let's say if I wanted to do this piece here, I would overlay the two of these, then I would zoom in, and I would probably just kind of in general clean that up by removing this excess here. And you can see that though it's not perfect, because wood is very forgiving, that'll pretty much work. And once again, I've already gone through and have done this step for my model. You can see at the end, it ends up looking like this. I've not only overlaid everything, I've also set the wood to an overlay. So you can see this is what it looks like normally, but you can usually set it to different things like multiply, or I did overlay just because I found that's what worked best for the given situation. So some of the other things that I have done is I went in and made a face and did the numbers for the face on the diffuse. So this is the face of the grandfather clock. So you can see that pops up. If I go back over here, I'm going to turn this back to textured mode. You can see that that is popping up right here. So what you're going to do is once you have made your different faces, you go into File and you'll export this. Normally it's a JPEG unless the texture that you have has something that needs to have transparency in it. You know, if there's holes in your object that you want to be able to see through, or you have something like a wire mesh, you'll go ahead and use transparency. Unless you have an object that is perhaps made of glass, you don't need to worry about transparency there, because we'll worry about that transparency within the material itself. Okay, so I would go through and export this, which I have already done. I usually name them diffuse, just because that is usually what we refer to the base color of a model as. So I'm going to go back to edit mode, and I'm going to go up here and change the window and put it to shader editor. So you can see here I have a image texture. I would add that in by doing Shift A, going to texture, and dropping in an image texture. You would go in here, you would find the texture that you're going to use, which in my case is this, and it'll pop it up, and you'll just drop it into the base color. If you don't see this, you might have to go to the material windows over here and hit use nodes, but by default I think most of that is set up in Blender 2.8. Now we're going to go into what this is. This is called a normal map. And if I go ahead and remove this, you can see kind of what the normal map is doing. It is adding fake details and fake bumps and textures to the, there's some on the rope here, it's adding extra details here, adding a little spindly bit there, and I'm going to go ahead and show you how that's made. So that's usually fairly simple. The way that you go ahead and make that is, I'm going to go ahead and turn everything else off. So we're back to this, and the normal map actually just looks like this. It is different. You draw all of your lines in different pieces using grayscale. The darker something is, the more intense the normal map is going to be. And if you need to do things like rounded surfaces, you can use Gaussian gradients, but you can kind of see what I've done here, where I've drawn different lines just where I need things. So this, if you look down here, like this is our rope, and if we go back to the model, you can see that I have some bumps and pieces here on the rope, and then I have like all of these faces are slightly rounded. You will then take that. I found a really nice website that can help you along with this. That is just called, well, if you just look up normal map online, I'm going to go ahead and pull this over here. One second. So this is the name of the website. I think you can see that if I extend, because I know this video is not in super high def. It's a GitHub repository, so you should be able to go and find that. And what you're going to do is you will load in your image over here on the left where it says batch. You should just be able to click it. It'll bring you over to your things. You should bring in that black and white image, and then it'll transform it into a purpley green and red-ish image. You can go ahead and play with these different levels and sliders to try to get different effects. You kind of get a live preview here on the side. Then you will then download that image. You will take it back into Blender. You will add that into an image node. You will then attach that to an image map that you get by going to Shift A, finding normal, or actually normal map rather. You will plug that in, then you plug that into the normal section of the principal shader. Then after doing that, you will have something that is like this. Now, if you want to make this usable in Unity, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and select that object. You are going to do export FBX. So this will be grandfatherclock.fbx. Then you should be able to go into Unity, do import new asset, that would be for me. That'll be over here. Grandfather fog.fbx. That should pop into the world. Oh, I forgot. I was naughty. I did something bad. Whenever you're exporting objects, you should do export selected objects only. Otherwise, you're going to get the light and the camera and all of the other objects that you don't actually want in Unity. All of your programmers and level designers will become quite miffed at you if you repeatedly put lights and other objects in the world that are not supposed to be there. I did that a lot last year, and I got scolded quite a few times. So try your best not to do that. Okay, where did I put that? Oh, I'm in the game mode. So now you can see that the grandfather clock will appear in the world, and somewhere his material should have loaded with him. I'm looking for it real quick. Sometimes you will have problems and it won't load with you, and you will kind of have to side load everything into Unity, which, yeah, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is import new asset. I'm going to do the grandfather clock.diffuse and the normal map that we were using for him. So those are now in the world. If we go back over to the clock, we can go to shader. You're going to go ahead and drop. So we're going to make a new material. Sorry, I didn't rehearse this bit. I apologize. So we're going to go ahead and make a material. You can go back over to where you loaded those assets. You'll drop this right into the color selection. Uh-oh. It's being positioned. Why is it not letting me do that? You should just be able to drag and drop textures. You might have to go back through and make sure that these textures are set to be textures and set this one to a normal map. And eventually when you're fiddling with it, sorry, this is the part that I'm least familiar with. At some point you should be allowed to drop, there we go. So once you've set it to be a texture, you can drop it into this little portion here. And then as for the normal map, you can go ahead and drop it over here. Then you can go ahead and apply this material to this object. I believe we were looking at the back of the clock right now, so that we're not going to see very much. So once you've dropped and dragged it into Unity, you should be able to look at it and test it to make sure that it is working properly. So yeah, you can see that we're getting all of the color and we're getting the different bits in the world. So this is about the quality that I'm hoping from you guys. You can definitely spend a lot more time if you want to dirty up the models, make them a lot more filthy and gross looking. You are really welcome to do that. I might spend some more time with this texture doing a little bit more advanced weathering to it, but for now, you know, from a top-down angle, because really you have to recall that most of the time that you see these objects, it's going to be roughly at an angle kind of like this, so a ton and tons of detail aren't going to be super necessary. Alright, this has been like a 13-minute long video. I'm sorry that like the last 5 minutes were kind of messy, but the Unity app part is not the part I'm the most familiar with, so I apologize. I hope this was helpful, and feel free to shoot me messages anytime that you need it. Alright, thank you very much, and I hope you have fun texturing.